The worst part wasn't that my mom told everyone I abandoned her. It was that for almost a year, they actually believed it. I was living inside a lie I didn't even know about. I found out on a Sunday. It was one of those slow afternoons that usually feels pretty safe. I was just standing in my kitchen, peeling peaches for a pie I didn't even want to make. Then my phone started buzzing on the counter. First my aunt, then my cousin, and then my older brother Theo. Theo never calls unless something's on fire, so I knew it was bad. I answered it, expecting some kind of emergency. But he didn't even say hello. He just snapped and asked, "What did you do to Mom?" That's exactly how the nightmare started. Theo was furious. He's usually the one who gets to have his own life while I handle everything else. But Mom had him totally convinced that I was the villain. At first, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. Mom was always super dramatic about little things, like if the pharmacy was out of her vitamins. I figured she was just acting up again. But he wasn't laughing. He told me she was telling everyone I cut her off, that I stopped paying for her meds, and just left her all alone after she took a bad fall. I put the peeler down. My stomach just went completely cold. I asked him, "What fall?" And the silence on the line told me everything. She was lying, and she was doing it on purpose. I never abandoned her. For 4 years, I did everything short of moving in. I paid her bills, drove her to appointments, and bought her groceries every single Thursday. I gave up so much for her. I even turned down a promotion because she cried and said she'd have nobody. The real truth? 6 months ago, I just ran out of money. I told her I couldn't give her extra cash anymore. That's it. I sat her down at her kitchen table and tried to explain. I told her I'd still help with rides and groceries, but I just couldn't keep handing over extra cash. I was completely tapped out. She didn't even argue. She just gave me this calm, practiced smile that used to totally fool me. She said she'd never want to be a burden. But whenever she used that word, trouble was coming. At first, she acted like she got it. Then the little punishments started. She'd ignore my calls for hours. Then she'd shoot me a text saying she hoped I wasn't too busy for her. She even told my Aunt Diane I'd gotten super career-focused. Which is hilarious, considering I make dental crowns in a windowless back room. I was working myself to the bone, and she's painting me like some ruthless CEO? Aunt Diane ate it right up, of course. She loves being the center of family gossip. Mom knew exactly who to feed her stories to. She was building an audience, and no one ever bothered to ask for my side. Then things got even weirder. I'd show up at her place with bags of groceries, just like I promised, only to find out she'd already posted online about learning to survive all by herself. She was rewriting reality while I was standing right there. Another time, she called me crying hysterics, saying her internet got cut off. I dropped everything after a brutal shift and drove straight over. I was sweaty, starving, and so mad at the cable company. When I burst into her living room, ready to fight customer service, I found her perfectly fine. She was just chilling on the couch, streaming a crime show on perfectly working Wi-Fi. I just stood there, trying to catch my breath, staring at the TV. She just blinked at me with these wide, innocent eyes. She actually said, "Oh, maybe it just came back on." She didn't even look embarrassed. That's when I finally got it. There was always a way for me to look like the bad guy. If I got mad, I was being cruel. If I stayed calm, she played the tragic victim. I was trapped in a game I couldn't win. My dad took off when I was 9, just packed up and started a whole new life. After that, Mom made sure she was the center of our universe. She played the saint and the victim all at once. Theo got out of the trap just by being the son. He was actually allowed to have his own life. But me? I was the daughter, so I was supposed to be loyal forever. Say, in a natural American voice, the older I got, the more it hit me. She didn't really want a daughter. She just wanted an audience, someone to sit there and confirm she was this generous, suffering martyr. I had dealt with her guilt trips my whole life. But telling telling everyone I abandoned her? That felt different. It felt final. I couldn't just let it go. So I called her that night. She picked up on the fourth ring, used this weak, tiny little voice. I could hear a game show blasting in the background. She was totally fine. I didn't even say hello. I just asked why Theo thought I abandoned her. She paused, gave this heavy sigh, and pivoted. Said she never used the word abandoned, just that I was being distant. I told her, "Mom, you made up a fake fall." There was another pause. Then she calmly tells me she did fall back in the spring and just decided not to tell me. Say in a natural American voice. That's when it finally clicked. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't embarrassed about getting caught. She was managing me, testing to see which lie I'd swallow. I tried using facts. I told her I called every day, that I was just there on Thursday, but she didn't care. She just snapped that I always need credit for everything. There's the pivot. Suddenly, I'm the bad guy. The selfish daughter demanding a trophy. I hung up before I started screaming. Just stood there in the quiet. Over the next 2 weeks, things just got worse. My cousin Nia completely stopped replying to my texts. Then Aunt Diane sent me this message saying she's still my mother. Like that somehow excuses everything. Then Theo called me up. He actually asked if I made Mom choose between my help and her respect. She told him I demanded praise every single time I did a favor for her. I couldn't even believe what I was hearing. I honestly started doubting my own memory. That's the absolute cruelest thing a manipulative person can do. They don't just lie about you to everyone else. They make you question if you somehow caused it all yourself. So I went back through my bank statements and my texts. I printed out receipts and highlighted all the dates. I even made a folder on my laptop and literally named it Sanity. I needed to prove I wasn't crazy. There were electric bill payments and pharmacy transfers right there on the screen. Texts from her asking me to pick up oat milk and fix her printer. There was zero abandonment. Just a massive paper trail of me constantly supporting her. But proof doesn't do anything if nobody wants to look at it. Every time I tried to explain, I just got shut down. They kept saying she's old, she's hurt, and family doesn't need evidence. That last part nearly made me scream. 3 weeks later, she asked me to come over because her phone contacts disappeared. When I walked in, she was wearing her soft beige sweater and acting totally normal. She offered me tea like she hadn't just blown up my entire reputation. She handed me her phone with this perfectly practiced, innocent smile. Her contacts weren't even gone. She just accidentally made the font size so huge that the names got pushed off the screen. I fixed it in like 10 seconds. I should have just handed the phone right back to her and walked out the door. I really should have. But while I was holding it, a message banner slid across the top of the screen. It was from Aunt Diane. It said, "Don't worry, we won't tell Maren about the dinner." My chest just tightened up. I don't snoop as a rule, but I was staring right at the proof that they were all talking behind my back. I don't snoop as a rule. But before I could stop myself, I tapped the message. It opened a group chat called Sunday Girls. At first, I just saw fragments of gossip. Then I scrolled higher, and the room seemed to tilt. There was my mother at the center of it all. She wasn't just venting, she was strategizing. She was making up entire conversations we never had. Then I found the message that made my hands go numb. She actually wrote that the fall story finally made Theo pay attention. Sad that I had to go that far. It was a deliberate lie, in her own words. Say in a natural American voice, buried under all the pity, I found the real motive. Theo had been talking about moving to Arizona for work. She needed to make me look completely unreliable. That way, Theo wouldn't feel comfortable leaving her. This was never just about money. She was trying to trap us both, me through guilt, and Theo through fear. Suddenly, I heard a spoon clink in the kitchen. I nearly dropped the phone. I started taking screenshots as fast as I could. My hands were shaking so badly I almost missed half of them. I sent them to myself and locked the screen, right as she walked back in. She came back carrying a mug of tea, looking perfectly normal. She smiled that practiced, innocent smile of hers. She set the mug down and asked if it was fixed. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. She was so calm inside her own dishonesty, not out of control, just practiced. I handed it back and said, "Yeah, it's fixed." I left 10 minutes later. My heart was pounding so hard it actually hurt my chest. I had lived in this family my whole life, without realizing the walls were completely fake. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't confront her. I just sat alone on my couch in the dark. I opened my laptop and stared at the screenshots pulling on the screen. I didn't call anyone else that night. I just picked up my phone and dialed Theo. I told him to come over right away, and I told him to come alone. He showed up looking pretty annoyed, which was exactly what I expected. He stood there in my living room, waiting for me to explain the emergency. I didn't try to ease him into it. I just handed him my phone. I had the screenshots pulled up, bright and clear. I watched his face as he started reading through the group chat. He read them in total silence. Once, then again, and then a third time, a lot slower. You could literally see him trying to fight the reality of what he was looking at. He finally looked up and asked if she really said all that. I told him yes. He rubbed his mouth and tried to say she was probably just venting. I almost laughed in his face. I had to remind him she literally admitted to inventing a fake injury. He just looked down and muttered under his breath. After a long time, he asked me what I wanted to do. It felt so strange having the power to decide what happened next. I told him I wanted the truth out in the open. We didn't want some crazy public ambush. We just planned a Sunday dinner at Aunt Diane's house. Theo told everyone he had big news about his job to make sure they all showed up. I remember every single detail about that night. The smell of the roasted chicken, the condensation on the water glasses. Aunt Diane was fussing with the napkins like it was just a normal Sunday. My mom showed up in a navy dress, looking totally ready for everyone to feel sorry for her. Every time Theo moved, she'd touch his arm. She was still playing the fragile victim. We actually ate dinner first. It's kind of funny how people can just chew right through all that heavy tension if there's enough gravy on the table. I just sat there, watching the whole performance. Then Theo finally cleared his throat. He told everyone he was holding off on the Arizona move because of, quote, family concerns. Mom immediately lowered her eyes, totally ready for the sympathy. But instead of comforting her, he looked right at me. He said, "Actually, before we talk about anything else, Maren has something everyone needs to see." The whole room just froze. I stood up with my phone in my hand. For a second, I felt like a scared kid again, terrified of making a mess. I looked at Mom, and she gave me this tiny, tight warning smile. I told them I knew what was being said about me, that I stopped helping, that I abandoned her after a fall. I said none of that is true. I was just done. I unlocked my phone and passed it over. I told them to read the highlighted messages out loud, right there, in front of everyone. The proof was just sitting there next to the dinner plates. As the texts were read out loud, the whole room shifted. Every single lie was right there. The fake fall, the grocery money, the plan to trap Theo. You could literally see the color drain from Aunt Diane's face. They got to the part where Mom admitted she invented the fall just to get attention. The silence after that was deafening. Aunt Diane just slowly turned to her and whispered her name. Mom didn't panic. She didn't even cry. Her whole fragile act vanished, and she looked at me with this cold disbelief. She actually tried to make it about me invading her privacy. I wasn't having it. I told her she lied for months. She claimed she was desperate. When I asked what for, her face just hardened. She said she did it to prove she still mattered. I could have screamed right then and there. I could have unloaded years of swallowed resentment on her. But suddenly, I was just too tired for rage. I told her she mattered, but not more than my own life. That hit harder than anything louder would have. Theo stood up, looking like he'd been slapped. He realized she let him blame me. He let all of us blame me. And for the first time, my mom actually looked afraid. Aunt Diane started crying, which honestly annoyed me more than it moved me. She kept saying she didn't know. Like forwarding pity and suspicion for months had been some innocent weather event. Nobody wanted to take real responsibility. My mother turned to me one last time. She said the sentence I'd spent my whole life waiting to hear, and somehow no longer needed. She said she never thought I'd expose her. Not apologize, not deny, expose. That was our real relationship in one line. I took a breath and told her I wasn't exposing her. I was just refusing to carry what she did anymore. And with that, I was done. I picked up my bag and walked out. The aftermath was messy, but not in the way I expected. My family didn't magically transform into wise, accountable people overnight. But the spell was broken. Some of them apologized quickly. Theo came over with coffee and sat in my kitchen for 2 hours. He barely said a word, which was his awkward version of remorse. I let him sit there. My mother, on the other hand, waited 3 days to reach out. She sent me one single text message. It said, "I hope you're happy. The family is shattered." Just one last desperate grab for control. I stared at it for a minute. People talk about closure like it arrives with trumpets and a perfect final speech. Mine looked like pressing one button with a shaking thumb. I blocked her number. That was the moment everything really changed. Not the dinner, not the screenshots, the block. I stopped checking my phone every hour for guilt. I was finally done being an emotional sponge. I stopped managing her bills that very week. I logged into every account and removed my card. I told Theo he could take over if he wanted, but I was done being her unpaid assistant. Theo and his wife set their own boundaries, and my mother absolutely hated it. She tried to recruit sympathy from distant relatives, but the story didn't stick anymore. Once the image cracks, people start noticing all the old fractures. I started rebuilding the trust in myself that I hadn't even realized I lost. I stopped checking my phone every hour waiting for a guilt trip. I even took that promotion I had turned down, moving to a better office with better pay. I painted my bedroom green just because my mother always said green walls made people look sick. It felt so good to just make a choice for myself. I was finally realizing how much of my life revolved around preventing her disappointment. I hosted Thanksgiving for my friends instead of family that year. I completely burned the roles, and you know what? We just laughed about it. There was no drama, no silent treatment, just actual peace. A year later, Theo finally made his move to Arizona. Before he packed up his car, he came by and asked if I wanted to see Mom with him one last time. He wasn't pushing, just offering. I told him no, not because I hated her, honestly. That would have been a lot simpler. I said no because I finally understood that love without truth just becomes a leash, and I was completely done wearing it. The strangest part is that sometimes I still miss her. Not the real version of her, maybe, but the mother I kept hoping was hidden under all that manipulation. The one who would tell me I was right to have limits. I don't think I'll ever hear those words from her, but I finally heard something way better. I heard my own voice. It was steady, it was clear, and it was mine. For years, my mother told the whole family that I abandoned her. But in the end, what I really abandoned was the lie. I finally learned that keeping the peace is not the same thing as love. The strangest part about all of this, sometimes I still miss her. Not the real version of her, maybe. I miss the mother I kept hoping was hidden under all the manipulation. The one who would someday look at me and say I was right to have limits. The one who would tell me I was never cruel for needing my own life. but I know I'm probably never gonna hear those words. And you know what? I finally made peace with that. Because even if she never says it, I heard something better. I heard my own voice. It took a long time to find it under all that noise, but it's there. It's steady. It's clear. It took me 30 years to finally trust it. It was late, sure, but not too late. For years, my mother told the entire family that I abandoned her. She spun this whole tragic web, and they believed it. I used to let that tear me apart. I used to think I had to prove them wrong to survive. But in the end, I didn't abandon my mother. I just stopped playing my part in her story. What I really abandoned was the lie. The lie that keeping the peace was the exact same thing as loving her.